Now a bit of a personal question, Johnny.
All right.
Are
Bring it on.
you older than JavaScript?
I'm the same age as JavaScript pretty much.
Incredible.
I feel like JavaScript is pretty. I can relate to JavaScript pretty much. I mean, just turned 25 and only now getting a bit mature.
Getting static types in your lives.
Yeah, pretty much. So it has been 25 years since it came out.
Yeah, and it didn't used to. I remember a day where JavaScript was not as beloved as it is today. So today it's the favorite, most popular and favorite programming language of everyone, of most people. I remember a time when IE6 was the king and JavaScript was really, really disliked. And it's crazy to see how the tables have turned now.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty happy that it has come so far, actually.
Yeah, to me, it's I know that's a topic we talked together so many times. To me, it's fascinating how we to go from this to I think it was done a 10 days prototype of some basic kind of basic style language programming language, and that we went from this to what we use now, for instance in React Native development with TypeScript and so on, without breaking backward compatibility. What I mean now, if you look at TypeScript, it's such an incredible, fully fledged, statically typed programming language. And I just, for me, it's hard to comprehend how you could go from this 10 days prototype to this without breaking backward compatibility.
Yeah, it's incredible what kind of old oddities are still in the language. Like, for example, if you on a website declare a div and give it an ID, that automatically becomes a JavaScript global variable, and that still works today. Super odd, but somehow we have managed to evolve nonetheless without breaking all of this. And I mean, of course, we require some compilers and transpilers nowadays,
Yes.
which handle all this weirdness.
Yes.
But nonetheless, it feels so modern nowadays.
Yeah. So I guess, linked from Sebastian Zlober mailing list, a timeline of JavaScript, the 25 years of JavaScript. And it's done by a developer named Nick Vidal. And he gives a bit of a timeline of things. And so there were a couple of game changers. The first one, I guess, was Ajax. So 2004, 2005, you start to see these rich web applications done in the browser with Google Maps or Gmail, which make these asynchronous requests in the background. I mean, now it seems so obvious, but at the time, that was a game changer that you didn't have to reload the page to get the information. You could make these rich clients. And then really it's jQuery that made it. Again, I think it was really hard to write JavaScript before jQuery because also you had to take care of browser compatibilities and so on. And jQuery changed the game in that regard. I think it changed the game actually so much that now it's jQuery is kind of built in the browsers, if you think about it, through the query selectors and so on. So that's how impactful jQuery was, is that now it's built in. And nowadays it's easy to make fun of Angularjs, but when it came out in 2006, that was truly an absolute game changer because finally we could build rich client apps, but in a truly scalable programming model, which was not the case with jQuery, I would say.
For sure. Wow, you're taking me onto a nostalgia ride right now. I actually started with jQuery before I learned any JavaScript. Like the first thing I ever wrote was like trying to like some tabs, and I had dollar signs everywhere, put on-click handlers everywhere. If you were to do that back then with normal JavaScript, it would have been incredibly hard. And they just normalized that and enabled some things, some really basic things that are now easy. I guess like jQuery had like the vision of a simple API to do stuff in the browser, and it was absolutely glorious. In some ways, jQuery is still like so much superior. It actually has like much less complexity than React. You will never accidentally trigger a use effect re-render because of the wrong dependencies, or your transpiler will not work. Those were such simple times.
Simpler days, yeah, true. No build step to your... but no, absolutely. But then, so you could build these rich clients, but then if you had like real like apps, it was really hard to do it in a scalable way. If you have also like if you were working with a team and so on, and that's what. So jQuery was 2006, and then 2010, Angularjs came out, and then you could really build these scalable apps.
Yeah, scalable to some degree, I guess.
To have scalable development.
I went pretty far with Angular. At some point, I guess I didn't use the best practices, but I also tried some CoffeeScript in between. But all this jQuery, CoffeeScript, Angular didn't really work out for me. So I think I abandoned everything, all the projects with these technologies, until React came around. And I think all the projects that I did in React, I still do.
Did you jump into React as soon as it got announced, or when?
I didn't really want to move from Angular to React.
Same.
Until they said, wow, you can actually build mobile apps with it. Then I said, wow, okay, this React thing is something. And then I started with React Native.
So, okay, very similar, because I was also on Angular. React was announced. I was like, oh, that looks so interesting. But then, obviously, it didn't. I mean, at the time, Angular was pretty mature. You had also Protector. You have like amazing end-to-end testing and so on. And I was like, ooh, React, at the beginning, no testing, no TypeScript. I was waiting for these things to come up before, getting into React development. And in Angular, there was a concept of directives, which were like kind of components. But the funny thing is that it was not the main way that people were building Angular apps, actually. And actually, it should have been. So looking at, as a developer, looking at all the concepts. And the thing, I think you agree, in Angular, you could do one way. You had many different ways to do the same thing, which was sometimes also a bit annoying. But actually, there were already this concept of custom components, but we never really leveraged its power within Angular. It's only when React came out that...
I definitely abused Angular for this. I think my strategy was to set properties and then $scope.apply. Sometimes once, sometimes I had to do it twice, and then it would update eventually.
Yes.
But I guess there would have been a good way to achieve perfect encapsulation of components.
Yeah.
Didn't discover that, was actually my fault. And then there was Node.js. Huge game changer.
Yes, huge game changer. 2009.
2009, wow. Okay, I think I started using it pretty soon afterwards, maybe 2011. It was still like Node.js version 0.12 or something. And, there was no ESLint, there was no prettier. I actually indented all my code myself. What I did in the beginning was I would like declare a variable var express equals, and then like require express, and I thought it would be funny to like indent all the requires mainly by typing in spaces and all that stuff. I spent so much time on that, and it looks so ridiculous nowadays. And
I remember people were pretty excited about the asynchronous programming model and the event loop of Node.js. Even though I think some of this excitement might have been overblown at the beginning, because when it came out, I think also because everything is single-threaded, was hard to manage. Today, it really makes sense also in the, I guess in the context of serverless and the fact now JavaScript also has one on the client that you use JavaScript everywhere. That's a huge benefit. You use the same libraries and so on. But I think people get really excited by the asynchronous programming model, even though, they might not necessarily take advantage of it in their infrastructures. But at the end, that created a lot of hype, I feel like.
Absolutely. It was breaking. Yeah, it was like, I don't want to say it was a game changer, but come on. the async programming model was a big game changer, but it was also so messy because there was no promises yet and no types. So people would write totally unmaintainable code.
Yes.
You could not understand your code afterwards.
And it was not so easy to scale horizontally. Not as easy as it is today, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, only that. So, for example, like people also started using Socket.io pretty often,
yes.
and that for me, I had to struggle if I wanted to load balance my stuff.
Exactly.
But like my biggest problem overall was like this asynchronous spaghetti code that I wrote. I could not understand. There were bugs in it. I had no type. There were no promises. Promises were another game changer that was needed to like really fulfill the vision.
Yes.
But still, it was like necessary that we went this step, because I feel overall we don't even appreciate it this much. But if you look for example, a Java app or a Python app, these apps kind of struggle to process the requests that are coming in asynchronously, and then maybe they have to like spawn a new thread for everything that is a blocking operation, which was also like so much verbose code. And like from experience, these Java programs have a much higher memory footprint. You have to like spin up so much more beefy servers to run, for example, a Spring app. And in that way, Node.js was revolutionary. With just you need 200 megabytes of RAM, a low-end CPU, and you could actually process so many requests.
Yes, and now with the serverless architectures, and which are also getting better and better, it's really the perfect fit, right? Exactly for the reason you described. So it was ahead of its time, because that was actually, and I guess it's a coincidence, but that was actually the perfect runtime for serverless architecture.
Yeah, that's right. The JC, pretty lightweight. Nowadays we have so many new innovations, like things like serverless or like Next.js. I would also put into that category, or like Dino. They are like the new kind of server technologies which try to get away from the legacy stuff and use modern tools, and of course they are bound to succeed. I think the future is going to show more of this evolution, and it's going to be even more exciting.
Absolutely. And so in this timeline that was published through Sebastian Zlober mailing list, you will see all the milestones you just mentioned, Dino, Next.js, I think. And then I couldn't find TypeScript anywhere, which to me is like one of the main reasons it's so beloved today. Without TypeScript, you couldn't use the language at scale. So I made a PR, because the website is open source, so I made a PR to add TypeScript to the timeline. I think that's fair to add it to the timeline. It's one of the biggest contributors of JavaScript being so beloved by developers.
Wow, that's like such a good thing that you did this. Maybe they wanted to not mention it because, I mean, if you look at language popularity charts, then it's like JavaScript is number 1 and TypeScript is now number 3. So,
but it's funny to see them at different languages, where TypeScript is JavaScript plus types. It's a superset.
They count as different languages, but I mean, come on, they are on the same team for sure.
Same team, yes.
So I don't see any problem. It's not a JavaScript versus TypeScript. So I think it's a great thing that you sent a PR, so we can
and
send
now
a message.
Dino supports it out of the box, which is huge, I think.
Dino supports TypeScript, and the interesting thing is that now they have switched from the normal TypeScript compiler to like SWC, a Rust-based compiler, so we can use multi-threaded stuff.
Wow.
WebAssembly is a huge game changer.
Also, yes.
But I guess technically not JavaScript.
Yes, but yeah.
What was your favorite moment in the JavaScript history that you have been through that you thought, wow, okay, now this is the biggest change? I know there were many, but...
let me pick 2. So the first one is Angularjs. I mean, absolute first time I tried Angularjs. That was truly a game changer. And yeah, because suddenly you could build this rich app, but in a scalable, like in terms of development, it was scalable. And the second one was React with TypeScript. So the fact that you could write, so no more templates, and you had a single type system for the HTML code, the CSS, and the JavaScript. And that you had these 3 things under the same type systems. For me, that was also completely mind-blowing. For me, it was really a holy grail of programming development. That I remember when I was a student, I got interested in tech. So I don't know if you know the Hack compiler, PHP compiler from Facebook that had like GSX kind of syntax. And when I was a student, I was fascinated by xQuery, which is similar because you had XML as a first-class citizen into the language. At the time, JSON didn't exist. And yeah, for me, I always wanted, if I wanted to build a web app, I was always disturbed that these 3 things, CSS, JavaScript, and HTML, were living under different roofs. And for me, it was clear that the best programming model is that when these 3 things live under the same roof. And for me, it was the biggest game changer.
Wow, interesting. So I respect it that you choose Angular as the biggest game changer in JavaScript history. I really do respect it. I think I am picking Node.js. When I switched from PHP to Node.js, I felt so empowered and was so motivated. I was coding for days with the Socket.io asynchronous model. I mean, it was so much fun. It changed so much, and now it powers all my servers, and there are so many CLI tools powered by Node.js, in my opinion.
Nice.
The biggest game changer.
And React with the component programming model of React also, I really think is like jQuery. So jQuery is immortal now because it made it into the browser. And I feel like the component programming model that React has introduced is also gonna live forever, and that is gonna outlive maybe the React library itself. But let's see.
React for me, that's a second biggest game changer. I mean, that was a pretty big one.
Now we use GSX, TypeScript, JavaScript, like modern features. It's a no-brainer for us. But you know that there are some supersets of JavaScript that also existed and you might never heard of. Or do you know about G++?
G++?
No, GS++, sorry.
JS++? Oh, wow.
You don't know about JS++.
No, if I never heard about it, I guess it must have not made it into the modern era.
It didn't made it to the modern era, but that was, I guess, an alternative to TypeScript. So typed JavaScript. But it didn't...
So it was like Flow, but now nobody uses it anymore.
Yes. Another one, which I had heard of, but you might not have been, E4X.
E4X. Wow, what is with this name?
You've never heard of E4X?
Well, what does E4X even stand for?
It stands for EmacScript for XML.
Oh, that sounds like JSX.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a flavor of GSX, but I guess that didn't make it to the modern day eras too. GSX, which is far from being perfect, but seems to be, I guess via React, to be the winner in this.
Yeah, wow. I mean, imagine if you started a startup and you bet everything on E4X.
On GS++ with E4X.
Wow, yeah, it must have been pretty bitter.
Sometimes you bet on technologies which look promising, but they don't necessarily end up being the winner. Sometimes timing is everything, and then luck as well. So, like, we were talking about Node.js. So there were also a convergence with cloud computing and other innovations, right? And you need to not be too early. You need to not be too late, I guess. So there are so many different variables. Where are there some technologies which you thought were promising and that died, kind of?
Well, I'm super careful. So I try to write a bit of CoffeeScript. And
so that's one. So did you believe CoffeeScript would be the future, or?
Well, I kind of, and CoffeeScript was like a pretty hipster thing to do, and I think that's the only reason why I did it, because like the code looked cool, but even though it was pretty innovative, I had no idea what I was doing, and I wasn't even leveraging the good parts about CoffeeScript. But since then, I've been so careful. I see people jumping on the newest hipster libraries or technologies, which many of them aren't going to be there in the long term, in the next 10 years. So I try to stay as close to JavaScript as possible. And this is also why I use React, why I think it's the best choice, because JavaScript is this train that cannot be stopped and it crosses the world.
It does seem to be a train that cannot be stopped. You mentioned Flow earlier. I used to be a Flow user because I liked the idea that it was not an extra build step. So with Babel I liked that it was not an extra linter, or you could use ESLint and so on. And I liked that this was only types, so that was JavaScript plus types, not a different language. Now TypeScript has become all these things, so now I use TypeScript, and now TypeScript is a clear winner. Also, I feel like Facebook might have dropped the ball a little bit on the open source side of Flow. So like they use it internally, but they don't make much efforts for the community outside Facebook to use it. But, maybe it was 2017, early 2018, I thought Flow was looking good until it was not looking good anymore.
Yeah, right. How long did you spend time migrating everything?
You
just dropped the project.
Yes. So luckily, I still have some projects which run Flow, but on very, very old version of Flow, and they're basically in frozen mode. I do have the React native element starter kit, which is done in Flow, but also it's done with class components and so on. So here, you would need to do, I think, a full rewrite. But yeah.
Yeah, the game has changed so fast.
Yeah. So JavaScript 25 years anniversary. So happy anniversary to you too, Johnny. And it might make it for another 25 years. Let's see.
Yeah, for another 2,500 years. I mean, it's like we were almost there when it was born, but I feel like it's gonna stay forever.